So Ron, just to kick things off, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody that we've got here on the call today? So who are you?
Hey, Sarah. Well, thank you. This is quite a group, and thank you for inviting me to participate. I am Ron Rimelman. I'm the Vice President for Environment, Health, Safety, and Sustainability for Nova Gold Resources. We are a company that's very focused on a very large gold project in Western Alaska. I've been working prior to joining Nova Gold 12 years ago, I was a consultant to the mining industry and worked on projects all over the world, focused on the environmental and social aspects of those projects. Somehow I ended up with a niche. I've worked on almost every mining project in Alaska at one point or another, which has been wonderful for me. But I've also had the honor over the last 5 years to be in a leadership role with one of our two national organizations, the American Exploration and Mining Association, including being president of that organization last year, which was a very time-consuming task, but also very rewarding because we are, like many of you, in the center of this debate that is going on about critical and strategic minerals. Now, we're a gold project, but we represent really, as an organization, the entire range of, we don't work with coal industry, so we're really the minerals industry across the board, everything from phosphate, which helps feed people, to the minerals that are so important to the energy transition. And this dialogue that's become very, very intense, but also, I think, very substantive on this question of, as you say, how do you develop the minerals that I think we all agree that we need, that are part of that energy transition, but also, do it in a way that is responsible, not only environmentally and socially. And where does the intersection with a lot of things like ESG and respecting indigenous communities and all of that fit with these kind of broader national, international goals that we have? So that's kind of who I am, and happy I don't have a set of slides, but we're doing this as a chat, and happy to talk a little bit about not only Alaska and where I work, but also some of these broader issues that we're dealing with in the United States.
So Ron, thank you so much for coming along today, because you're certainly a very busy individual. But let's start off with Alaska, because as you said, you have worked all over that particular state. And something I'd be really interested to hear more about is the context with regards to the tribes and the native corporations within Alaska, and that interaction between exploration and mining companies with those organizations and those communities. Could you give us a bit more insight to that? Because it's a little bit different in Alaska compared to other parts of the world.
So, I could talk about this for a long time, but, whenever you move a mining project forward in Alaska, there's always a component of it that involves the Alaska Native population. It is especially in Western Alaska where we work, this is a map of, you can see the region. It is a massive region. It is larger than the state of Ohio. What's unique about where we were when Alaska was the last state to settle the land's claims between the United States government and the tribes. And they set up a rather different approach than in other states. In other states in the US, we have reservations. In Alaska, actually, Alaska was divided up based on this concept of Alaska Native corporations. And there are 13 of them in the state, and each one is responsible for a different region of that state. And this is one of those regions, these corporations were allowed to, or selected lands and actually minerals that became part of their, responsibilities. So they own those lands and minerals. And one of the areas that they selected was where we are, the Donlin Gold area, which was known to be a very significant area of gold deposits and reserves. So where we work, we are working at the invitation of two Alaska Native corporations, and their shareholders are the people of this region. So that we get to trust in that aspect of it, if we break that trust, we will lose our opportunity to develop this deposit. It is one of the largest undeveloped gold deposits in the world. It is challenging to build. We have no infrastructure. But again, everything that we do as part of this project is in conjunction with our partners. They're very much engaged in all of the work that we do, not only from an environmental perspective, but really from a business perspective. Our agreements with them are very much set up to ensure that we talk about equity in mining projects. Well, they truly have that equity. And it's more than just dollars. It is, helping them grow their businesses, investments in the communities, and that aspect of this is a very hard region of North America. There are a lot of challenges here. And that's true throughout Western Alaska and that aspect of it. So, we are very much engaged in, helping them fulfill what is really kind of their, the whole concept of, and it's called the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, which is really their dual mission of advancing the, frankly, economic interests of their shareholders, but also protecting their way of life. And, a little bit about that. This is still an area where 80% of the diet that people have comes from the land. It's subsistence. And in our case, 80% of that comes from the rivers. Salmon have a status that's unlike any other natural resource because it's such an important part of their concept, their culture. Right now, the rivers it's been a very late year, are starting to break up, and that really starts the fish season out there. And really for the next few months, so much of people's lives revolves about being on the river and, harvesting the resources they need to survive. And this is why, a project like Donlin is frankly difficult for folks, because it's in a place where, the natural resources are so sacred to people. And anything that could, water is so much often at the center of so many of these debates over mining. Well, in this case, that river and the resources there are just integral to people's lives, and they've been that way for thousands of years, and that aspect of it. So much of what we do is working with folks we talk about trust, whether people feel like that they can see development of a project like this benefiting themselves, but at the same time that it will work in harmony with their way of life. My experience is that, so much of this, we're outsiders. And so much of what we have to do is spend the time. I just came back from, about on that map, you'll see the community of Aniak on the Kuskokwim River. Just spent 2 days there with a group. We have a committee that talks about subsistence and how we can protect subsistence resources and that stuff. So we had a great 2-day dialogue about not only the issues associated with mining, but continuing to get the input of the people from the region. And that's so important, not only from a trust level, but also, how we can operate in a way that is not only good from a business perspective, but good from a social and environmentally responsible perspective. So again, when we talk about things, bringing about a lot of the concepts that so many smart people on this call have talked about, down to the level of working with folks and, talking to folks and listening and trying to bring that concept of how do you bring a mine to development, which is very challenging. I mean, a project like this, to be honest with you, hasn't been developed since the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which was almost 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago now. And how do you bring that to, a point we can build it? And we've been working on this with 20 years, but also do it in a way that is very much integrated with the people of the region and that aspect of it. So that's a little bit about, and I just highlight one other aspect of it, which I think is important for us, and just a backdrop. The 5 operating metal mines, and there's a lot of smaller mines, there's a lot of placer mining in Alaska, but the 5 big mines in Alaska, I would say, have a very good record within their communities. Red Dog mine, which is one of the largest lead and zinc mines in the world, actually is very similar to this. It's on Alaska Native Corporation lands, and their partners are the regional corporation in Northwest Alaska, and that aspect of it. So when you ask people in Alaska, do they want to see the existing mines continue to operate? A very high percentage of Alaskans say, yes, we support that. But when you turn it around and when you ask people, do you want new mines? That number goes way down. And it's, well less than 50%. And it's a challenge that we face as part of this. And I think I think this is true with mines in many places throughout North America. Once mines have a chance to work within the communities, and I think this is particularly true over the last several decades, they're not perfect. We make mistakes, we do other things. That sense of community and responsibility is there, but overcoming the hurdles and the lack of trust about getting a new mine started is something we have to deal with almost every day as part of what we do.
And so, Ron, with regards to that, so you've got that, I guess that maybe the fear of the unknown in terms of the potential for new mines, whereas if something is there and people go, okay, great, I can see what you're doing, I trust you. How does that compare to your work at the association level? So with regards to the Mining and Exploration Association that you've been leading over the last year, is it a similar feeling that you get there? People have that fear of the unknown, or is it very different at that level?
I guess I'd phrase it a little bit, Sarah. I think it's the fear of the known.
Okay.
Meaning people still associate mining with the legacy that, frankly, we sometimes have a hard time putting our arms around. Mining, both from an environmental, and I think sometimes when we look at new mines, we get into the trap at times of, so focusing on some of the environmental issues, which are important, but the social issues that really have, frankly, caused lasting effects in communities. So we have a hard time, I think, at times bringing forward that message of, how in the present we've, I think, done a lot of very positive things in communities. And I think mining companies as a whole, if you look at some of the sustainability reports that have been published, that was mentioned by the gentleman from Chile, I think mining companies a lot, but still that legacy of, and, in places like this, there are some historic mines that frankly did not. And unfortunately, mining doesn't go away. Those remnants are there and they are seen by people all the time. So the legacy issues that we have to overcome that, frankly, our opponents are sometimes, better is probably the wrong word, but are very adept at influencing folks and their opinions, but it comes from their experiences. And our community's elders have a very special status. They, are very much respected in the Yupik culture. And many of those people were there when mining did things to people's lives in places that, we have a very difficult time convincing people that those things won't occur going forward. And, even for us, where our partners are the Alaska Natives, and when we employ people, 70% of our employees right now are people from the region. Even that still creates a significant hurdle for us to overcome. So where you take it nationally, I think it's very much part of the same debate. People just see, particularly Indigenous peoples, they just see so many of what the negative effects of mining are, and in many cases are things that are still there that are having to be dealt with. And that's a hurdle that's very hard for us to overcome. I think the dialogue has advanced. I think these needs in terms of minerals and other areas, I think there's been a very positive change. I think people are having very substantive conversations about this, both in the US and in Canada, who we work very closely with, but it's still something that's very hard for us to overcome as part of it. And I think sometimes we get a bit, things get a bit fixated on those past elements of it. And, how can we do a better job showing and some of the things that we do, we
talk about things like no net harm and other aspects of it. I think right now the door is open with mining companies to really look at ways to be part of the broader community and that aspect of it. We're not, where we work in Western Alaska and in many places, we're not going to solve all of the challenges that are out there. But I think mining companies are looking for that opportunity to be socially responsible, not only in the snapshot of where they operate, but also on a sustainable level with the communities themselves. Again, these are broad concepts, but I think more and more, if we can find places where we can do a lot, and it's a trite expression, but where we can do good and, help do things that address, some of these bigger issues and that aspect of it. I think that's an area where and ESG is playing a big role in that, good or bad. I know it's tied in a lot of ways to investment decisions, but it has moved industry at the highest levels to be thinking more broadly about these concepts.
And so with that, Ron, are you seeing a change again, kind of at that, I guess, at that national level? So through your role with the American Exploration and Mining Association and interactions, say, with US government, NGOs, etc., have those discussions, has that dialogue been changing over the last couple of years? Or what's going on with regards to that and the general discussion and listening to one another?
I think it has moved. I think that, again, I think we are having more substantive conversations than we've ever had before. I think one of the things some of us have we tend to be a pretty insular industry. We like to some extent to talk to each other. I think one of the things we've been trying to do is broaden out our stakeholder engagement, both in terms of the diversity of people we talk to, but also the various organizations that are out there. As universities have really tackled, we've seen that with some of the most, frankly, prestigious universities in the United States, really trying to get at some of these issues and that aspect of it. The government, taking a much more bipartisan outreach, because there are folks that realize these, how integral minerals are to the green economy. So I think the dialogue, as you say, has gotten more substantive. I think there's still a long way to go. These are hard issues, but yeah, I think it has changed. And I think the industry has become more willing to kind of broaden who they talk to and how they talk about things. There's a little bit of, it's a little institutional bias. I think mining companies, like everybody else, get a bit sensitive in the feeling like, we've been thinking about these community issues, environmental issues for years, but I think we are breaking down some of those barriers to having a lot of those conversations and being part of that at the highest levels within companies. I think that's the other aspect of it. You're seeing more and more at the board level, and ESG is very much a part of this, is at the board level, at the CEO level, how to talk about these concepts is part of their business planning and that aspect of it. And, I think, so we're still, again, we have a long way to go. I think to some extent, as we get back to critical and strategic minerals crisis issues, I don't know yet people fully comprehend how, essential a lot of these minerals are and how far from where we need to get to we are from all the way through the mining life cycle, that we simply, at least in North America, and particularly US and Canada, we simply aren't moving the mineral projects forward that we need to at this point. And that's a challenge we're facing, but at least people are trying to put their arms around it and figure out how to have a constructive and good dialogue as part of it. And it's still, frankly, listening to each other as much as anything else.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Ron. I think I could probably sit here and listen to you for the rest of the evening, because it would be absolutely fascinating. And thank you so much for giving us that insight into the Alaskan context, because it is different to other parts of the world and actually provides a fantastic case study for those countries that are considering doing things a little bit differently to perhaps how they've done it in the past. So with that, thank you so much, Ron. Everybody, a round of applause for the fantastic Ron Rimelman. Thank you very much.